ለመማር ወደ ትምህርት ተቋም መሄድ ግድ አይደለም። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
ራሳችሁን ከኮሮና ቫይረስ ወረርሽኝ እየጠበቃችሁ በቤታችሁ ወይም በተመቻችሁ ቦታ በኢንተርኔት አማካኝነት በኦንላይን ትምህርታችሁን መከታተል ትችላላችሁ።
ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና ከእንግሊዙ ኢንስቲትዩት ኦፍ ኮመርሻል ማኔጅመንት ICM ጋር በመተባበር የሚሰጡ ትምህርቶችን ተከታትላችሁ በ6 ወር ጊዜ በዓለም አቀፍ ደረጃ ተቀባይነት ያለውን የስልጠና ማስረጃ ባለቤት መሆን ይቻላል።
ልምድ ባላቸው መምህራን እየተማራችሁ ጥያቄና መልስ የክፍል ስራዎች ፈተና መፈተን ክፍል ውስጥ እንዳላችሁት አይነት በኦንላይን ባላችሁበት ቦታ ከናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ
Good evening, class. In the previous class, we have seen the early parts of the research process. So we have discussed about the selecting titles, the background of the study, the statement of your problem, and the hypothesis and general objectives. In this class, we are going to see the literature review. As we have discussed in the previous class, the literature review, it is different from introduction. It is also different from the background because the issues that these three topics raise are different. Okay, a literature review. A literature review discusses about published materials. It discusses about what you read in relation to your topic. Sometimes it may also include information that are specific to your area, depending on time period. Therefore, a literature review is a survey of scholarly sources that have direct relevance to your topic. For example, you may use books, journals, articles of the academic circle, and theses and dissertations that are produced by universities. Therefore, these are the scholarly sources. But they have to be related to your specific topic or the research question that you are going to take. A literature review, it is a pertinent part of a thesis. Therefore, in your senior essay also, you are going to include the literature review. And therefore, it is one of the significant parts of any research paper. This section or the literature review, it synthesizes the existent literature and it usually identifies the gaps in the knowledge. The main purpose that you survey the literature is in order to identify the gap or in order to show your reader where the gap or the problem arises. Therefore, a literature review, that's why we say literature review, it has to be relevant to the topic so that it can help you in showing your readers the gap of knowledge in that area. In addition to showing the gap in the knowledge, it may also provide theoretical foundation for the proposed study. And it also substantiates the presence of research problem and it justifies the research as one that contributes to something to the academics or to the knowledge. Therefore, by doing so, this helps to validate the methods and approach that you are going to use or that is included in the proposed study. Let's share the note. Let me share the note because here we have to see the steps and the stage. Therefore, it's better to share the material. While writing the literature review, there are steps that you have to follow in order to simplify your job. In any way, a literature review can be just a simple summary of the sources, but it usually has its own organizational pattern and combines both summary and synthesis. Here is one of the main differences from the background. Because in the literature review, it is not a simple summary. You also make synthesis of the previous works. Because synthesis and summary, they are different words. Yeah? A summary is a recap of important information, but a synthesis, it is the reorganization or reshuffling of information. Therefore, while you reshuffle or reorganize, or while you synthesize your information, you give new interpretations. You give new interpretation to all the materials, and you also include new materials into your interpretation. Therefore, a literature review, it is both a summary and a synthesis of the literature. In addition to that, the literature review also traces the intellectual progression in the field. It includes the major debates and the major arguments in the area, depending on situation. The literature review also evaluates the sources and advise the reader on most pertinent or relevant issues. In any research paper, you use literature review as a foundation or a support for new insights that you are going to consider. Therefore, the focus of the literature review is to summarize and synthesize arguments and ideas of others without adding new contribution. Here, in these parts of the paper, you are not supposed to make any assertions related to your paper. In relation with the matter. Therefore, in this paper, in the literature review, you are not supposed to include your arguments. That rather, you organize the arguments that are made by others. Okay, welcome. Welcome, Nanaye. Okay, Kabra. Okay, let's see the steps. To simplify the literature review, here is the note. You have to come from the general into the specific. Here is the note. Yeah. Come from the general to specific, from the topic of the background into the supporting studies, or from the background to narrow topics or narrow studies. And from this, you also narrow it into your closest or related research works. Therefore, in the literature review, it is better to write it from the general into the specific. Therefore, you can organize your background in this way. For any literature review in the academics, literature reviews are useful reports but they have to be up to date with what is current in the field. Most of the time you are supposed, in the humanities, for example, in the language, there is no such strict policy, but in other strict sciences, it is better to use the up-to-date materials, recent developments, because you have to show the recent development and what is left in this research development in the area. Therefore, for scholars, the depth and breadth of the literature review emphasize the credibility of the writer in his field. It is by this way that you show your reader that you know the topic. You have to consolidate to the reader that it is your subject. You know the subject. You are an expert in that subject. If you have a strong literature review, you can convince your reader that you are a master of your field or your study. Therefore, in this way, by making a depth and critical literature review, you can show the credibility. You can build your credibility. You can build your own credibility. Literature review also provides a solid background for the research paper. It is not only for making people know you that you are a master of the paper or master of the subject, but it provides background for the reader as well as for the paper. Therefore, before further investigation, it is better to have a good and comprehensive literature review. Therefore, this comprehensive knowledge of the literature review is essential for any research paper. Let's see the difference between, I told you that the literature review is different from background. Therefore, let's see the difference, some of the difference in table form. Yeah, here is the difference. The difference of the background and literature review. We have seen the background in the previous class. This is today's class. Therefore, in the paper, we are seeing the structure. In the paper, it comes or it appears, the background comes in the first part of the introduction. I told you it is also different from introduction. Background is also different. Therefore, background, it appears in the first part of the introduction, while the literature review comes after the background. It comes after the background. This is one of the different. The content, what does it present? One of the issues of the background is to show the context of your study, while the literature review is a critical analysis of the literature, the previous works, or the scholarly works that came before you. The purpose, when you see the purpose of the background is to highlight the significance of the study, or significance of your study, while the literature review's purpose is to evaluate the progress of knowledge. It is in this way that you show there is a problem, a real problem, research problem. There is a real gap in the research area. Therefore, the purpose of the literature review is to show the progress of the knowledge in your field. What does it do? The background introduces the topic, while the literature review helps identify the gap. It helps identify the gap in the literature or in the research works. What involves in the background of the study? It involves introducing the broad area of the research and narrow it down to the problem at hand. Because you give a broad overview of the research and you come to your problem. This is the background. However, in literature review, make analysis of the literature, analysis of the previous works. Because we have said that literature review is both a summary and a synthesis of the previous works. It is both a summary and a synthesis. Therefore, you evaluate the materials. Simple reading is not a literature review. You have to analyze it, you have to make a synthesis, you have to make a reconstruction of the previous arguments or the previous research works. But when you see the length or breadth of the tool, the background, it is short. The only purpose is to introduce your topic. Therefore, it is short and concise, while the literature review is somehow detailed. It is detailed because you have to show the arguments, the early works, and the previous works, and by this way you will show what is left in the research or what is the gap in the research area or in your field. Hello, Kabrat. Hello, Kabrat. Are you following me? Okay. Let's see the important points in the literature reviews or in the process of making a literature review. In the early phase or the first issue, the first task that you are going to make is to identify what has been read, what has been written on the subject or on the topic that you are dealing with. Therefore, the first step in the literature review is, in the work of literature review is to identify what is written and what is not written. Then you can determine the extent of the research or the extent of the literature by identifying what is written and what is left. Next, you can aggregate the empirical findings by previous works related to your narrow research question. Therefore, after identifying what is written and what is left, you make a correlation with your work and you compare it to your research questions, so that your literature review is going to be evidence-based, or your question indirectly, your research question is going to be an evidence-based research question or a clearly articulated research question. After making this, you are going to generate a new framework and theory. New framework and theory to your study. Particularly in the small-scale researches, this is not a task, or it is not an expectation from the students. The purpose of the literature review, there are a number of lists. Let's see them. The purpose of the literature review, I have read them I have included them in the note. Here is a list of the purpose of the literature. Let's see one by one. because they are listed already. Let's see that. One of the main purposes of the literature review is to find out what other scholars are writing or what other scholars have wrote. This is one of the main. Therefore, if you identify what is written, you can also correlate it, or you can put your topic in a clear context, by showing the gap in the previous works. Therefore, one of the purposes is to show what others are writing or what others wrote. The other purpose is it enables you to delimit the scope and narrow the research problem. For making clearly articulated research problem, this is delimitation is one of the guiding pillar. Therefore, you have to delimit your scope. You have to delimit your scope. By so doing, you narrow it, and you narrow the research problem. If it is broad, it is difficult to manage. Therefore, it is better to make narrow and clearly articulated, specific, concise research problem. The third purpose is to ascertain the availability of expected data. When we choose a topic or a title, we expect that there are available sources, both primary and secondary data. Therefore, if you make a comprehensive review, indirectly, you identify the secondary sources. You see the availability of the secondary sources. Because the literature is the secondary source or secondary materials. Therefore, if you make comprehensive literature review, indirectly you simplify your task in the next processes by identifying the secondary sources. Therefore, one of the issues is it helps us to see the availability of the data. Another purpose is to compare one's findings or results with others, with the previous studies. We have to compare the results or the findings of previous works, and you have to compare your work with these previous works. Therefore, the comparison is not limited to previous workers, previous researchers. You have also to compare your results or findings with the previously available materials. Therefore, it helps you to compare your findings. In addition to that, it avoids duplication of work. If you work a research on a topic that is already covered, that is already dealt, there is no purpose. Yeah? Therefore, making a literature review helps you to avoid duplication of work, duplication of tasks. Therefore, your work or your research will have a purpose. It will have a value. If it is repeated, this is worthless. Yeah? Another purpose is it helps us to learn from earlier works. It helps us to learn from earlier works because these early researchers or scholars they face difficulties while conducting the research. Yeah? Therefore, if you conduct the literature review, you may also have a glimpse view of the difficulties that are encountered by the previous researchers. Therefore, you can get an insight into the difficulties, and you can also include a new approach You can include your own new approach to tackle the difficulties. Another purpose is to learn the methods and approach that are appropriate to your study. Okay. As I told you before, the literature review simplifies the other tasks, the remaining tasks, by showing approach, by showing new techniques that are appropriate to your paper. Another issue, this is obvious, you can learn appropriate theory by reading comprehensive literature. You understand the existing theories and you identify the theory that fits your study. In addition to that, the literature review highlights the gap in the research. The gap or the topic or research problem that is not covered by the previous works. If any topic is dealt by one researcher, it doesn't mean that it is wholly covered. Yeah? There are different issues that researchers leave based on their objectives or based on their problem statement. Yeah? Therefore, you can, by reading their literature, you identify the gaps which is not considered in the previous research works, or which is not part of the previous objectives. Therefore, literature review helps to highlight the gap in the research, and it also shows you the debates, the controversies in the study or in the topic. You have to see the debates that have existed in your subject. Lastly, it helps you to focus your research and sharpen your research question. Yesterday we have seen research questions and hypotheses. Therefore, in your research questions, it could be 1, 2, or 3, or 4, depending on the vastness of the task. Depending, for example, we have said for seminar works, you can have one research question. But for broader works, research works, you may need to formulate 3 or 4 research questions. For example, in dissertations, you usually are expected to formulate 4 or 5 research questions. Depending on the depth of your study, you can sharpen your research questions. The next issue or the next subtopic in this chapter is the steps in reviewing the literature. There are several steps that you are expected to follow. Therefore, let's see the steps. The first step in the work of research is to have a clear research problem. You have to have a clear research problem, or you have to have a clear topic. Therefore, the first step in the literature review is going to be to narrow your topic. You have to make your topic very specific, very articulated. Therefore, narrow your topic and select paper that is limited in scope. That's limited in scope. That is manageable. That is manageable under the circumstances. For example, if the due date can be one issue, the purpose of the study might be an issue. For example, you are expected to work senior essay, which is less than 1 year task. Therefore, you have to limit your scope. You have to limit your scope in order to finish it within this 1 year or less. Therefore, narrowing your topic is one of the first steps. The next step is to search for the available literature. You have to search the available literature. Then, after finding several literature, you can narrow down based on their relevance. Therefore, first, you have to define your source. You have to define your source based on keywords that are included in your topic. For example, in the previous class, one student told me he is working on the quality of service in hotels in Addis Ababa. Actually, he didn't narrow it down. He's working on that. But service sector. This is one broad topic while you search the literature. Then hotel service. You can narrow it down based on the topic. After searching for literature, the next step is to organize the selected papers, the selected materials by looking into patterns and subtopics. There are available sources. You identify the available sources. Then after identifying the available sources, you narrow down by using keywords. Then you organize based on subtopics. For example, you can see the important trends in the research. What are the influential theories? You can also give other headings. You can also give other headings based on major themes in the area. The next step is to develop a thesis and purpose statement. Okay, sorry, I forgot to scroll it. You have to develop a thesis. I'm right here. You have to develop a thesis or purpose statement. Purpose statement. This is one of the central issues in the steps. The steps of the literature review. Because in the purpose statement, or one of the purpose of your purpose statement or the thesis of your paper is to show your arguments. You have to show your arguments. You have to summarize the conclusion. You have to summarize the conclusions. Here comes your certain central arguments, purpose statement of your literature. Finally, you write the paper. This is the last stage. After writing the paper, you are going to review it for if there are unnecessary or irrelevant informations that you have included in the literature review, you are going to avoid them. If there are gaps or if there are remaining materials that have to be filled, you can add additional information after making review. Therefore, this one is the last step in the literature review. After completing the review, you have to review it. You have to review, including the construction of the sentences, the paragraph, and other issues. There are several issues that you have to review. Generally speaking, there are 6 steps in the literature review. You can writing the literature review. We can summarize all these into 6 steps. The first one is to formulate the research question. We have said that you have to simplify, you have to narrow down the research questions and the objectives, because the research question and the objectives, they are in one way or the other, they are connected. They are connected. Therefore, you have to have a clear research question. You have to have a simplified, well-articulated objective or objectives. You will have one big objective, general objective, and several specific objectives, usually 4 or 5 specific objectives. The next step is searching for the literature. We have already said it. You have to search for the availability of the literature. After searching, you identify the relevant ones. You identify the relevant ones. Therefore, screening comes in the third step. Screening for the relevant materials. Then you assess the quality of the study, the quality of the materials. You have to see, to assess the quality of whether they are dependable or not. You have to assess before using them. Then, after assessing the quality of the materials, you have to extract the data that are useful for you. You have to identify the data that are useful for your topic. Then you make analysis. Here comes the analysis part. Because literature review, I have said, it is a synthesis of the literature. Yeah? You have to analyze the data. You have to reorganize the available data. All in all, the purpose of the literature review is to demonstrate the familiarity of the writer. The familiarity of the writer to the topic he or she is working on. You have to show your familiarity with the material, with the field. You have to convince your reader that you know the materials, you know the subject, you know the topic. This is one of the crucial issues. If you convince your reader that you know the subject, he or she expects something from your findings. Yeah? Therefore, you have to include in this literature review up-to-date informations, pertinent theories, or the major theories in the area. After including the information that you took from the literature review, you have to make citations. You have to make references. Therefore, you have to be sure that you have correctly cited the materials. You have to make sure that you make references correctly. You have made references correctly. In addition to that, in addition to the referencing or citation, you have also to make sure your style of the referencing. Because the referencing method, it is different from subject to subject, from field to field. You have to follow the guidelines that is given by your department. In addition to that, you have to make sure that you did not commit plagiarism. Check whether you make plagiarism or not, because this is one of the academic criminals. Yeah, it is academic criminals. Therefore, one way of solving this problem is to correctly cite your source, to correctly make references. Otherwise, you will fall into this trap of plagiarism. Therefore, finally, you have to make sure of whether you made plagiarism. Necessarily, plagiarism doesn't mean that made such a crime deliberately. You may make such mistakes unknowingly by forgetting the citation or by forgetting to make notes of your sources. There are several reasons that you can forget to clearly cite your references. Therefore, plagiarism, avoid plagiarism, avoid plagiarism. Make references for every information that is taken from others' work. The next subtopic in this area is in the literature review, or in this chapter, is criticism. Criticism. Simply, this is simple. Criticism in literature review. You can simply define criticism as evaluation and interpretation of the literature. Evaluation and interpretation of the literature. Therefore, you didn't simply take the notes, you didn't simply take what you read in the books, articles, journals, or thesis. You have to make criticism to your information. You have to clearly evaluate the information that is provided in this literature. Therefore, criticism is essential in writing the literature review. You have to evaluate your sources, your literature. You have to interpret the information that you get from the literature. Therefore, criticism in literature review is the evaluation and interpretation of the sources. Criticism allows you to focus on aspects that are most important. If you make evaluation and interpretation of the literature or the material, you will focus on the most important ones. You are going to focus on the most important ones. Therefore, it helps you to focus on important aspects. However, when conducting your research, you may find many references that will not be suited to your literature. Therefore, before you came into this tiresome task of evaluation, you have to skim through the resources. You have to skim through the material. You have to read the material beforehand, whether it includes the information that you are expecting or not. Therefore, skimming is one of the tasks that you made before making detailed criticism or evaluation of the literature. Therefore, you have to make a quick read through the table of content, the introductory paragraph, the abstract. These are the important parts that you can take a glimpse of the material. From the table of content, abstract, and introductory paragraph, you can get what is all about the material. Then you can evaluate the quality of the material or the reliability of the material before using it. Therefore, by making quick reading or skimming, you evaluate the quality and reliability of the material, whether it is useful for your work, whether it is words of trust to be taken as a source or not. You have to evaluate before making detailed criticism. Next is the techniques of literature review. Techniques of literature criticism. Techniques. Let's see the techniques. These are technical issues, therefore we'll see them one by one. While you make the literature review, while you prepare the literature review, you have to consider these issues. Let's see the issues. Or these are technical issues. First, know the material. You have to know the material. You can simply know by skimming or quick reading what the matter is all about. Therefore, the first step is you have to know the material. You have to understand the material. This is the next step. Therefore, comprehend the issues that are discussed in the material. You have to know the interpretations, the contrasts, the arguments that exist in the issue. Therefore, to comprehend the material, to clearly understand the material is also one of the big steps. Okay. Then you can apply your understanding, your comprehension by illustrating or solving the problems relating to the classification of issues. Therefore, in the techniques of literature review, there are several techniques that we are going to see. For example, citation. Since it is a literature review, you have to refer the material. You have to make citations. Therefore, citation is one crucial issue that you have to seriously consider while writing the literature review. Okay. When you cite the reference, when you cite the material, you cite the material if the material serves you as a source. If you take someone's idea, if you take someone's findings, if you take someone's even opinions and thoughts, if you take any idea from some other's work, you have to cite it. Next, you have to cite it when you use different materials that are included in the works of others. For example, even if it is not included in the literature, if you take materials that are important sources of your work or your research, you have to cite. For example, you may take image. You may take different files or documents from individuals, from their research or from their archives, from their collections. Therefore, you have to cite that person. The citation includes the acknowledgement of anything that you take from others, or the acknowledgement of ideas of others, materials of others, or materials or ideas that are not creations of yours. Therefore, this is a citation. There are three ways to refer to a source, or three ways of making citation in the literature review. The first one is to make direct quotation. Let's avoid the distraction. Sorry for the distraction. Okay, there are three ways of citation. Let's see them. The first one is direct quotation. And the second one is paraphrasing. The third one is summary. In any scientific research, it is good, or it is better if you use your own word. You are advised as much as possible to use your own word. However, it is also possible to make quotations or to include quotations in the literature review. Therefore, though you are advised to make paraphrase, you are also allowed to make quotations. You have to take quotations from others' work. However, if the only issue is you have to include the author's name. You have to include the date of the publication of the material that you are using. You have to include the page number. Therefore, you can quote, but you have to clearly put the name, the date, and the page. This is the important issue. Because if you didn't make this, you are going to commit unknowingly plagiarism. Therefore, better to use your own word or to paraphrase. But when you take quotations, you have to take the author's name. Here are the issues: author's name, the date of publication, the page number of the quotation. You are advised to make quotations for any. Actually, this is not a strict one, but if you take more than 3 words from others' material, you have to quote it. If you take it directly from others, more than 3 words, you have to include it under quotation. Because quotation is the language of others. It is the word of others, taken word for word. Yeah, quotation. We say quotation if it is taken word for word. It is not taking ideas. It is taking the ideas word by word. If you borrow the ideas of others word for word, you have to make quotation. That is quotation. The quotations, they have to be identical. See this one? Quotations should be identical to the original assertion of the writer, to the original language of the writer. They have to match to the source. They have to match to the source. If you make mistakes in copying, this is also one of the shortcomings of yours. But if you want to make a quotation, you have to seriously copy it word for word, because it has to be identical. This is direct quotation. However, while you take a quotation, you can avoid some irrelevant informations or irrelevant words that are included in the authors. For example, when you need to leave some part of the quotation, you have to put it this way. And let me write it. The quotation mark. Yeah. So somebody's ideas, blah blah blah. Then you have to make ellipses. Dot, 3 dots. Then you continue the words of the other, that person. This is direct quotation, but this indicates, these 3 dots indicate that you left some part of the quotation, some parts of or some words of the author. This indicates that the ellipses here indicate that it is a direct quote. This indicates it is a direct quote. This indicates some words are left. They are left. You can leave some words for different reasons. If it is grammatically incorrect, if it has no use for you, you can avoid it. But make sure that you include it under quotation mark. You have to include it. Under quotation mark, you have to include the ellipsis here, the three dots. This is one way of making direct quote. If you want to change some words of the author, there is also another way of making. If you make to change some words of the author, here I change the word, therefore I put it under square bracket. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. This means that you took a direct quotation of somebody, but you have changed some part of his words. Some parts of, for example, if the use of the language is incorrect or inappropriate, or if it is grammatically erroneous, you can change the word. This indicates that you have made a change to somebody's work. It is different from this direct one. Here you leave some part, therefore you indicate, you put three dots. Here you took somebody's idea as a whole in a direct quote, but you change some of his words. I'm sorry. Okay. Therefore, when you make a direct quote, you have to make sure you have correctly copied the words of the author. You have to make sure that you copy the words. When is appropriate to make a direct quotation? When it is appropriate? I told you that it is better if you put it in your own language or if you paraphrase it. But when it is, why we make direct quotations? Therefore, when is direct quote appropriate? First, it is appropriate if the paraphrasing or if the phrasing is unique or strengthens the argument. If you think that you are going to miss the message of the writer, or if you are going to miss the strength of the message of the writer or the argument of the writer, it is better to put it in a direct quote than paraphrasing it. Another, it is also appropriate to make a direct quote when the essence or meaning of the text would be lost. Therefore, than summarizing it or paraphrasing it, you may choose to use the author's idea word for word. This is if you think you are going to miss the meaning or the essence. Sometimes while we paraphrase, we make mistakes by losing the context, or the essence of the message. Therefore, if you have such kind of doubt, you can use the direct quote. The other point is, if you want to show the authority of the author, particularly in order to strengthen your arguments for the next discussion, if you want to show the authority of the author, you can also include the direct quote. Therefore, so that you can make emphasis, by using the words of the author. The simple, there are different ways of the direct quote. You can include the direct quotations within the text. However, if it is large, it is better to put it in a separate section. For lesson. because for here, for fewer than 40 words, you can include the quotation within the text. You can include the quotation within your paragraph. Therefore, you can enclose it into your paragraph, but you have to make sure that you have included the quotation marks. And if you change the words, you have to put it under bracket. If you remove some words or if you omit some words, you have to make the ellipsis or the dots, the three dots. Therefore, for less than 40 words, you can include it into your own paragraph under quotation, while it is under quotation. Before the end of the quotation and after the end of the quotation, you have to make the quotation signs and full stop. For more than 40 words, you have to make a separate one, a separate paragraph. You have to make a separate paragraph. Usually, normally it is said that you make a separate direct quote for more than 4 lines. If the direct quote is more than 4 lines, it is better to put it in a separate paragraph, indented. There are some techniques of putting a separate paragraph, for more than 40 words. For more than 40 words, you have to put the direct quote in a separate paragraph. Let's suppose this one is the direct quote of another person. Therefore, it has to come in a new line. Therefore, omit the quotation mark. That's one task that you have to do is you omit the quotation mark. When it is under your paragraph, you include the quotation mark, both before and after the end of the quotation. However, in a separate section, you omit the quotation mark. Then you start the block quotation in a new line. This is new line. Then you make indentation. If the paragraph starts here, the quotation should have to be indented. It has to be indented. Therefore, you have to come closer to this one. Indented. It should not be the same line, in the same indentation with the sentence of your own or paragraph of your own. Therefore, indentation. Indent it. Indent the entire paragraph as a whole. Then you make a double space. This is the lining. Then place the punctuation mark immediately after the end of that. You mean you have finished the quotation. Therefore, you have to put the punctuation mark after the end of the quotation. These are technical issues that you can also talk with your advisor while you work on the paper. Okay. Therefore, we have seen one way of citation, that is quotation or direct quotation. The second way of citation is paraphrasing. It is paraphrasing. As I have already said it is preferable to put your own words or to put in your own language or to paraphrase it. Therefore, paraphrasing means rephrasing others' words, rephrasing somebody's work in your own language. Therefore, you have to change somebody's work and findings. You have to take the idea, but you have to change the language. You have to rephrase the language. A paraphrase, it is a detailed restatement of somebody's idea. Detailed restatement of somebody's work. You rephrase the ideas of the others in your own word, but it is detailed. It is not a jot down note or a summary. It's not a summary. You have to take the idea as a whole, but you put it in your own language. Therefore, when you paraphrase, you have to take the passage or the message as a whole and put it in your own words. You have to take the whole passage, the whole idea, the whole information, but you put it in your own idea. Therefore, in paraphrasing also, you have to make citation to the original source. You have to cite the original source. Paraphrasing doesn't mean that since you make it in your own word, it is yours. It is not yours. Yeah? Therefore, you have to indicate that it is not your own idea. You have to cite the source of the information. Who is the source of the information? It has to be included. It has to be included. Normally, as I have said, in paraphrasing, it is a detailed statement of the idea of the writer. Therefore, other than the change that is made on the organization, on the wordings, and the sentence structure, the paraphrase should be identical in meaning to the original message. We have said that direct quoting is identical word for word. But here, it is identical in message, not in words. Not in words. Therefore, even though you make change to the structure of the paragraph, to the structure of the sentence, the idea of that writer should be identical with the original one. It has to be identical with the original one. Therefore, make sure that you didn't change the message of the writer, the message of the source. After you clearly take the information, you also cite. You also cite the name of the author, the date, and the page. Sorry. Therefore, since it is a detailed one, when you come to the length of the message, it is almost identical with the original one. It is identical with the original one. The message is identical. The length is also somehow identical to the original one, because the passage, the sentence are restructured, but the whole message is taken. The whole message is taken. Therefore, in length it is also identical. However, when you paraphrase, make sure that you change the structure of the sentence. You make change to the language. This helps you to avoid plagiarism. If you face difficulties in changing the language of the author, you are going to take the original one, the original text. That means plagiarism. If you take more than 3 words in the same way that the author wrote, it is plagiarism. Therefore, you must change the sentence structure and you must change the language of the original text. The language of the original text. It's important to note that you didn't take the word of the author. The third way of citation is summarizing. We have said that paraphrasing, it is detailed. However, summaries are short. Because the focus of the summary is the idea, the main message of the writer. Therefore, you take the main message or the main idea of the author, but you are not expected to take everything. You are not expected to paraphrase everything. Therefore, you can simply jot down the main ideas of the author. Therefore, it is different from paraphrase that it is shorter in detail. Since its concern is to take the main ideas. Therefore, you simply take the main idea and put it into your own word or in your own language, like paraphrasing. And you make a shorter summary of the original work. Therefore, in summary, your task is going to be to make an overview of the material. Let's say when should summary be used? Like we have said here, when should we use direct quote? Let's say also when should we use summary? We use summary, then direct quote or paraphrasing if you want to provide background information. If your main concern is to provide your reader the background information, you can simply jot down the main ideas of the author and you can present it in the form of summary. Therefore, we can use summary when our task is to provide information, background information for our readers. We also use summary when we want general information. When our concern is to find out the general or broader information, you can also make summary. However, still we have to make citation. Therefore, citation is also important. You have to make an in-text citation. There are different styles actually. We'll see in the coming classes the styles of citation. For example, APA citation. We'll see it in the next classes. But still, even you take only the main ideas, even you summarize only the main ideas, you have to make credit, you have to cite the writer. In direct quote, you put it under quotation. In paraphrasing, you put it in your own language, therefore you are not required to include the quotation mark. The same way in summaries, you are not expected to include the quotation mark, but you give the citation. The name of the author, the date of the publication of the material, the page, everything should be included. There are some qualities that differentiate paraphrasing from summary. As we have already discussed, paraphrasing, it is detailed, summary is somehow shorter. Therefore, let's see the similarities. Both involve restatement of the original author's idea or words. Therefore, you put in your own language. Therefore, you have to make a restatement of the author's idea or words. Restatement of the original idea is one of the similarities. Because both summary and paraphrasing, you use your own word. In addition to that, both require the writer to give credit or to make citation of the source, citation of the source. Therefore, we make citations in the same form, citation of the source. In both paraphrasing and summary, unlike the direct quote, they seem as if they are used. They seem as if they are used because they are your own words. They are your own words. So the idea came from the other author or original author. Moreover, they are similar to yours. They are similar to yours because they are your words. This is their similarity. It looks like your own idea, but you differentiate it from your own idea in that you make citation. You make citation. That citation indicates that it is not your own idea. There are differences. When you see the differences, paraphrase is almost identical to the original one in that it is detailed, it is in the same language, therefore moreover it is almost identical to the original one. Therefore, they are different in their accuracy. Paraphrase is detailed in accuracy. The ideas are comprehensively included, while in summary, it is short. Therefore, many ideas could be omitted. They could be omitted. Therefore, summary is a condensed one because it is concerned only on the main ideas, on the main message, while paraphrasing is somehow detailed. Therefore, the main difference is the purpose. Because in paraphrasing, we give a lengthy detailed overview of the idea of the author, while in summary, we make a brief idea on what we are concerned on. Therefore, our concern is the main message. It could be one paragraph or two paragraphs. You can simply put it in 2 or 3 lines. However, if you paraphrase 2 or 3 paragraphs, more or less, it is going to be, your paraphrase is also going to be 2 or 3 paragraphs. They are almost identical in length and detail. Therefore, this is the end of the class. There are some issues that we didn't cover here. We leave these topics for the other chapters because it is significant to put them in the other section than in the literature review. Citation of sources in text. This is related to the style of referencing. Therefore, we will discuss this in the other chapters. Numbering of citation. There are different ways of citation. You can put it within in text, or you can give numbers, and you can give for the numbers endnote or footnote. Therefore, there are numbering of citation, giving numbers. Author date citation. The bibliography or reference list. There are different forms of preparing the bibliography or reference list. Therefore, we will see the styles and the ways of writing, bibliography, and the other chapters. Therefore, we are left with 3 chapters. Chapter 4 is on research methodology. Chapter 5 is on data analysis, interpretation, and presentation techniques. And finally, chapter 6 is preparing a research report. Therefore, more than half of the sections of the paper are covered. We are left with these topics. If you have questions, you can send me your questions. You can send me your questions, or you can simply call me in my number. Okay. Okay, this is the end of the class. Thank you. I'll see you in the next class.
በትምህርት ከፍ ብሎ መብረር ይቻላል። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ከከፍተኛ ትምህርት አግባብነትና ጥራት ኤጀንሲ ሙሉ ዕውቅናን ባገኘንባቸው በማስተርስ ዲግሪ ኤምቢኤ በስትራቴጂክ ማኔጅመንት፣ ኤምቢኤ በባንኪንግ እና ፋይናንስ፣ ኤምቢኤ በቢዝነስ ሊደርሺፕ፣ ኤምቢኤ በሪስክና ኢንሹራንስ፣ ኤምኤስሲ በኢንተርናሽናል ትሬድ እና ኢኮኖሚክስ ዘርፎች በእውቀት ለመቅረጽ የበቁ ፕሮፌሰሮቻችን አረንጓዴ መብራታቸውን አብርተዋል። በነገራችን ላይ በኬንያ ሀገር ከሚገኙ ስመጥር ዩኒቨርሲቲዎች በሚመጡ ፕሮፌሰሮች የትኩረት መስክ ትምህርቶቹ መሰጠታቸው ልዩ ያደርገናል። በምርጥ የትምህርት ስርዓት የተገነባው ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ በመጀመሪያ ዲግሪ በአቪዬሽን ማኔጅመንት፣ በሆቴል ማኔጅመንት፣ በአካውንቲንግና ፋይናንስ፣ በማርኬቲንግ ማኔጅመንት አስተማማኝ ትምህርት ይገቢውና ራስዎንና ሀገሮን ይለውጡ። አድራሻ 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።